The Patriot used to be one of the best heavy tanks at tier 8, and of course this is a premium. Surprise, surprise. And of course we are looking at this vehicle in 2022, at least at the very end of 2022, and I want to see whether this vehicle really does stack up. And so we're watching a replay here by Groucho, and this is one of the best Patriot replays that we've got available to us, and it is unbelievable. It is of course on one of the best maps for this vehicle, Ruinberg, I guess, as a more town map, and you're seeing a nice blind fire potential there. I don't know whether that will hit or not, but I guess we'll find out later on. But at the very beginning of the game, it's always nice to make an early poke. Now, you can get punished quite hard if you do poke a little bit too aggressively, but using the armor model quite nicely here, able to farm a couple hits on the Tiger. Now, the Tiger is a good tank in its own right, but with now the VK who's pushed up into the counter position to where we're looking here, it's not particularly the best in the world. Now, if this was, for example, a hold down T29, it would be a much bigger problem, but because it's a VK3601H, you can pretty much penetrate through the turret, so it's not a problem whatsoever. So you don't really have to worry about this position at the moment, but maybe that will change as the game progresses, and as the M3Y, who looks like he's trying to cross, potentially maybe, but it's not looking like he's going to be able to, having his team supported in this area as well, meaning that basically if they push it's going to be terrible for them. But this Tiger 2, who's pushed up obviously quite aggressively, hoping to get a little bit of damage, is really struggling against the might of the 240 alpha damage 90mm compared to the 12.8 I believe that his vehicle gets. So the better rate of fire in this scenario coming off way better because of the fact that just more consistent. When you've got better DPM and when you are more consistent and you've got a good player sat behind the gun, then of course the Patriot's going to come out with the win. Now, he can't aim too much when pulling around this corner, because the whole point about the Patriot is to flick around, deal your shot of damage, and then pull back before anyone has the ability to maybe catch you in a track or somewhere in that region where you feel like you're then going to get taken out. So this really quick movement coming in and out, even if it means that you do miss a shell every now and again because of that movement, is still worth it. Now, this VK has returned to his position from the beginning, but of course he doesn't quite realise that you don't need any pen to go straight through the tank he's in. So the AMX on the enemy team does indeed make the same mistake that the Tiger 2 has done, and he's pushed up onto this corner. Now, that in itself is not necessarily the worst thing to do, but against the Patriot that has way better gun stats, and of course played by a very, very exceptional player here, then it's just probably not going to go very well for him. And in a tank that is, to all intents and purposes, not particularly the greatest at tier 8, yes, definitely going to struggle. And with the arm model of this AMX65T being pretty trash, it's not really a problem whatsoever. And so in this game, you're now seeing the power of what a constantly reloading, constantly firing Patriot can do against some tanks that just don't really have a chance whatsoever. So in this point in the battle, he, of course, our player here, is trying to push, trying to cross, and then make a bit of a carve through the western side of the map towards that VK that was spotted earlier. And of course, having received a few hits already from the Patriot, is probably a bit triggered. So whether or not that will end up coming to pass with the final shell going into that VK is unknown. But the OI decides to fire, which was, I mean, he needs to fire at some point, but he does so, and it allows the Patriot here to get around the corner and start farming the tier 6s, which of course are just absolutely no match to the armor of the Patriot, which is very, very good from the front, albeit the turret armor is really where you want to be, but either way, it's just not looking good for the enemy team. Now, the VK does manage to get a shell there, potentially could have come round side scraping, but at this point it's maybe just a mad rush to try and get as much damage as possible within this game before it ends. And saying that, he finishes off the Jag Panzer IV. Now there's an OI on the enemy team of 565 hit points, but remember this is an American tank, and if the OI actually has a little bit of a brain, it would be possible for him to shoot down onto the engine deck and pen. Now it doesn't look like the OI is very aware in terms of his brain capacity at that moment in time, and so he's gone. I mean, to be honest, it's a tier 6 heavy that's pretty sluggish and slow, and you're not expecting a whole lot, but he could have potentially done some damage against the Patriot. It doesn't look like it was going to be the case, but either way, the M2Y's backside is wide open for the Patriot to give him a little bit of American spice, and of course he does so without any warning. And now it's a case of coming up against two tanks, a T-34-2G FT, which is the tier 7 Chinese tank destroyer, and the Su-100, a very dangerous tier 6 tank destroyer that actually has enough pen to be able to deal with the Patriot. Now this is something that you don't usually get on a tier 6 vehicle, and so you have to be worried about that lower plate that this vehicle has, because it is a weak point. As with all American heavy tanks, it is basically going to be the downfall of this vehicle. And it's why maybe some of the newer premiums that literally don't have any frontal weak points get away with being so overpowered compared to something like this, which when it was released was very, very strong. It's just not anywhere near as good as it once was. And I guess that is power creep at its maximum. That is literally the definition of power creep. When you looked at things like the Defender, when you looked at things like the Chrysler when they were first introduced, the idiot-proof tanks, you look at them in today's meta and yes, they're still very, very good, but they're nowhere near as good as they used to be tier for tier. But either way, you can still have fantastic results, and that is exactly what this replay is showcasing because of the main armament of this, because of the armour, and when you get in the right matchup like we're seeing here that's favourable, you're going to come away with a brilliant result, and that is what we've seen. So 7,350 damage done in this tier 8 medium / heavy is certainly a very, very good result. And of course, slipping up there, it isn't of course a medium, but it is a heavy, and it plays almost like a medium with the speed of a medium essentially and the DPM of a medium, so it's easily confused. But either way, at this point it's just trying to find the final couple of shots into the Su-100, the T-34-2G FT, and of course the GW Panther and the hidden S51 that's most likely in A0. So all of those vehicles are definitely a bit of a danger, at least for the Patriot, because when you've only got 500 hit points and you are open to artillery fire, it can go very, very badly. So you have to keep aware. Hopefully the victory comes in the form of pressuring the Su-100 and the T-34 to come towards the cap circle, and when they go into the cap, it's then time to crunch them down, move forward, and then essentially grab them from the rest of their hit points that they have and use the DPM of the Patriot here. So it's been a lot of talking about the Patriot, but I'm very, very interested to see what you guys have to say, because I completely agree that this tank was very, very powerful when it was first released, but I'm not entirely sure if I think it is as powerful, or at least anywhere near as good, because it just has kind of lacked in a lot of areas now, because the armor model, with all of the premiums, with all of the OP 850 alpha tanks that we now have in the game, it's just it's a lot harder to come away without taking a ton of damage. And with the big cupola that is on top, and people do hit this quite often, although it isn't as much of a weak point as you'd probably like it to be, since the armor is actually fairly well angled, and it also has a decent amount of armor to kind of combine with that, but it's certainly still enough to carry in these sorts of scenarios. Now there's 780 hit points on the enemy team left, and there's a GW Panther lying around in wait at some point within the game. Now the S51 does indeed get spotted, but the GW Panther is the key target at this point, because with the GW Tiger out of the way, it's time to then focus on the S51, and with the S51 on essentially a one shot now, definitely the tank you want to remove, because that tank can remove quite a bit of the hit points remaining on the Patriot, if not all of them, within one shell, or even if he misses, it can really negatively impact your game against the other two actual tanks, and definitely a bit of a clutchy butthole moment at this point. So, what do you do in this sort of scenario when you're in World of Tanks? Well, of course, keeping level-headed is one of the most obvious, yet one of the things that people throw straight out the window when they get into this scenario. And with an SU-100 and a T-34, both tanks that are, within reason, pretty okay. The SU-100 being the more powerful tier for tier, but in this game, definitely not really that much of a problem on their own. But the key thing about them is that they do get fantastic camo. Unfortunately, not good enough camo to fire without being spotted, but oh no, a terrible mistake. Well, not a mistake, but just an absolute shame to be able to bounce that round off of the SU-100, and now it's a case of just remaining hidden to try and find the T-34. So we're in a very, very good spot at this point, because you can take one shell from the T-34 without actually being taken out. So it's just a case of trying to hit your own shots into him. Now, T-34 hasn't got the best armor, and of course he's still going to be in the same position. You still know that he's going to be over there, and of course, knowing that our player here, who has done 8,082 damage whilst detected vehicles on the enemy team, that has definitely got some blind fires, has had an outstanding result. And you can see here the T-34 on his last legs pushing out, which could have been potentially the winning gameplay for his team, but unfortunately not, and the Patriot ends up winning here. And of course, what a fantastic result for this tier 8 heavy tank that I just found awesome. I loved this replay entirely. The carry at the end, just showcasing that even having the power creep that has been going on for the last couple of years, and since Wargaming's inception, to be honest, yeah, it still can be as powerful as it once was back in the day, and maybe under the right hands, more powerful than most. But other than that, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. Don't forget, if you want to check out another tier 8 heavy that has been recently added and is not one of the old ones, then definitely check out the BZ176 video that we've showcased on the channel, because that tank is absolutely outrageous, and hopefully you'll enjoy that one as much as I enjoyed this one. But other than that, I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. Don't forget to check out some of the other content other than the BZ, and I hope I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.